Hey there YouTube, welcome back. This is the Allegany Northern in N scale, and today we are going to do the complete layout tour to begin the 2024 layout update season. Okay, so before we get into too much in the layout, we probably should talk about what is the Allegany Northern and what is the railroad supposed to represent. So the Allegany Northern is a fictitious line. It exists somewhere in the Allegany Mountains, and as such, it is primarily a coal hauling line, but given that market conditions change from time to time, it has adapted, just like most railroads have, and it carries everything from coal to chemicals to intermodal and mixed freight. In addition to those, you'll see that there is also rather robust Amtrak service. And all of that leads us to the Allegany Northern itself. The Allegany Northern is actually a short line railroad that had its first custom painted locomotive made in 2023. And let's go take a look at that now. Although it is not new, the Allegany Northern does have an Elko, and that is the paint scheme, blue and white. Actually, it's actually two shades of blue. And it does look a little bit like the Cumberland Mine colors, but it's a slightly different paint scheme. And that line pretty much switches the industrial area on the upper deck, and it interchanges with the other two railroads that occupy the layout. And that is CSX on the upper deck and Norfolk Southern on the lower deck. So, in order for those trains to interact, we've got to first talk about how the system and how the layout runs. So let's go take a look at the control panel. Okay, the control panel for the layout is a modest one. It is a DCS 52 Zephyr Express. That was the first start into DCC about 3 years ago. And then it has since had a booster added to it. And there are two walk-around throttles, one of which I'm currently holding because we got trains running, and the other one is behind the wall here, and I'll show you in a minute, and it is for the switching operation. And then, of course, we just have a basic Cato turntable control for, of course, Cato turntable, and the layout does operate on either IR or radio, or you can plug into one of the various Loconet ports around the layout. While the layout is completely DCC for all train movements, there are two bus lines that run underneath the layout. One is for the DCC system, the other one is for the switch control, which is done simply by toggles here that work the Cato Unitrack turnouts throughout the layout. There will be a third circuit that runs the layout that is for the signals, which is a current work in progress. If you've watched any of my previous videos, you know that the layout is just now being signaled, and the next step is to build the last little grouping of signals, and then, which I think there's about 26 signal heads, which I think equates to something like 18 or 19 actual signals. But they are showcase miniature signals, and you can see that there are a handful of them here, and they're sort of all over the place at the moment. But we'll wrap that up in 2024 with the programming of those signals. And then the last thing that runs underneath the layout is the lighting control, which is for all the buildings and street lamps and that sort of thing. So there are four circuits that run all the way around the layout. The lighting one is sort of segmented. It doesn't go all the way around, but it hits the primary area. So we are in the town of Allegany here, and this first area is going to be a large steel fabrication where scrap steel comes in on gondolas. It'll get unloaded here, and then this is going to be a large fabrication building, and that is going to be where our coil cars and our flat cars of finished products leave for the open road. Okay, as we come into Allegany, we get to our first little mini scene. Obviously, it's a little bit under construction, and in more ways than one. It is a construction scene. It's a road building scene, and my compactors and some of my guys are laying down on the job because I haven't quite put them back together yet since I started working on the steel complex. And then there is also the Amtrak station and a small engine facility, which is basically just there so I can display some locomotives. And of course, some maintenance of way equipment. There is a rip track, which sometimes holds maintenance of way equipment and sometimes holds equipment that needs repaired. It's a destination where I can drop things off, but there's no structures or buildings that it serves directly. The one and only other industry in Allegany that is served by rail is a graphics printing company, which receives paper products by boxcar and very large quantities of ink by tanker car. And then, of course, we have the actual town itself, which is still in the process of being detailed. So you'll notice that there are some people, there are some vehicles, but not a lot of either. And as we come to the far end of Allegany, we have the seedy part of town where there is a police presence. Eventually there will be a police car with lights, biker gangs, and of course the booby hatch, which is where all of the businessmen from Allegany and sometimes the railroaders go to they go to grab a drink and maybe a little bit extra if they've got some cash available. And then if we jump back here, we do see that there is always progress on the layout, and that includes tearing down old buildings and making way for new ones. So we have a demo scene buried in the back, and that brings with it some construction as well. And that'll get us out of Allegany. The track on the layout is all Cato unit track, and it is double track mainline all the way around the lower deck so that two trains can pass each other. During an operating session, it becomes more of a single mainline with passing sidings using crossovers, but that's for another video. And during open houses, when there are guests, of course we can run two trains or more simultaneously. I do have the ability to run up to 5 trains with the number of throttles I have, although trying to keep track of 5 trains on the layout is not always that much fun. Okay, so off of the main line, we do have a Y here, and that goes to 2 very important locations. One is the engine facility, which features a turntable and some extra storage track, and the other is Union Station. And Union Station in the town of Uniontown is a bustling location where Amtrak delivers not only the fine folks in the Allegany region, but also cargo, mail, and yes, they do also offer auto services. So this is currently an ongoing project that is, I think, probably 2 years into the planning and somewhat building stage, but basically I'm looking for a super modern platform with a not so modern station up above. This is going to be a large courtyard. There'll be full detailed interiors, as there will be with all of the buildings eventually on the Allegany Northern. And then this foam core area, which is sort of a mock-up and also doubling as a storage area, will be fully detailed out for parking lots and all that sort of stuff. So take you back down around here. We're on the other side of the peninsula. And you can see there's quite a bit of locomotive storage. For the most part, they are just here on display. You'll also notice that there are a good number of locomotives representing a good number of various rail lines, and that is 100% on purpose. So through the beauty of least power, I can justify a good number of these lines to be seen together. And as far as the fallen flags and the old paint schemes, and in some cases, some of the locomotives that are no longer readily found in service, well, guess what? For those, I just use It's My Railroad, and that's what I'm going to run. So, in and amongst all of the other things that model railroading is definitely a collecting hobby, and I do like collecting locomotives and rolling stock, and I don't take any real serious look at whether or not they are time specific or road specific. If they look good and I like them, then I buy them. So from time to time, you will see anything from an RS3 in Canadian Pacific to some more modern diesels, SD40-2s, and straight on up to your modern Genesis and everything else. So I do collect a various group of locomotives, and you'll see them scattered throughout the layout, and as you watch videos, you'll see them come in various paint schemes, and they're all equally loved. Sound is a new thing to the railroad. It is within the last, I'm going to say, year. So now I pretty much buy all locomotives already DCC equipped and sound equipped. The locomotives that are a little bit older that I converted within the last 3 years, for the most part, have Digitrax decoders in them. And like these ones here running in stealth mode, those are all Digitrax drop-in decoders that I threw in myself. Programming the DCC is not the thing that I find the most fun, so when I can get it done by somebody else, I will take them up on that all day long. Okay, one of the main industries here is a coal-fired power plant. It has a small receiving yard. That shed represents a hidden rotary dumper. It does have a dedicated locomotive. And we are slowly detailing it out as we go along. And I do occasionally like to have some fun things, like an archaeological dig site that found some real dinosaurs. And for those of you who like all things prototypical, you probably cringed a little bit. But I promise you, you will get over it. Stuff like that I do try to hide in the back so that while it's fun and guests will see it and immediately call over their siblings to see it, it for the most part can hide in the back and there's no issue. And from the main line, it disappears and everything looks pretty prototypical. Okay, so we come up from the power plant, and there is a small scrap industry which will serve our new steel industry on the layout. So it's hard to see buried back there in the wilderness, but there is a yard office right there, and then of course both road and rail serve the industry. And then behind that we have an Amtrak station on the far side of the tracks. That is a small interchange yard that is typically used for housing coal cars destined for the power plant, but right now the remnants of a through freight are there for distribution in the town. So we're actually going to go back down along the main line, and we're going to follow the branch line back through the town. So there's the yard office for the small interchange, and it's a good place for crews to stop. I also have one of my favorite structures on the layout is a dilapidated barn. And the idea is that, yes, there are horses there, but they are not from that barn. They are from adjacent fields, so that would be modeled somewhere beyond this, that once the backdrop is in, will be sort of visually represented. And they just kind of wandered into where the old barn used to be. So we have this area where there are 4 bridges. The 2 main lines are on the right-hand side, and then there's the branch lines, or the 3 bridges on the left. So if we backtrack here, we can get back into town. Lots of things to do here. We have a manufacturing facility that does furniture, so it receives bulk materials and then ships them back out by rail mostly. And that allows me to bring center beam flat cars, bulkhead flat cars, and box cars all to the scene. We have a cement distribution center, which also acts as a transload, which allows me to drop off various aggregate cars. Of course, we've already mentioned the Amtrak station. And then we also have a manufacturing facility here that receives box cars, and of course an industry that is no longer rail served. I like to include some things like this on the layout, even though it doesn't add operation. It does give the story a bit of life, as it adds sort of history to the railroad, showing that it's gone through some changes over time. And then of course we have our liquid asphalt plant. And then of course down here we have some more construction scenes. You'll notice that there is a lot of heavy equipment on the layout, and that is for good reason. I am in the AEC industry, and so heavy equipment and construction is kind of part of my life, so I like to include it in as much on the layout as I can. As we come along the front here, got some line striping crews. We've got an old gas station, and then we have a very modern shopping plaza. So what I wanted to do between the old buildings and the new buildings is show the old buildings going out and the new modern facilities coming in, and that also leads us to a little bit of some street running, which is kind of fun. And then if I drop down just a little bit here, I know you're going to get a little reflection from the glass, but I do have some fishermen who have caught a little bit more than they were expecting. So just another of those little fun scenes for you to find. Okay, if we continue down the branch line in the other direction, you will note that we changed seasons. So most of the layout is in autumn. However, I do like winter second to autumn, and so I wanted to model a transition between the 2 seasons. I've enjoyed the challenge of trying to accurately model what melting snow and thin snow and ice look like. And I got several how-to videos if you are curious on how I did it. However, once you get into the winter side of the layout, it does go hard to the paint with winter. And everything is snowy and white. And that includes snowball fights and the like. But if you stay down that branch line, you come down into this quarry. And that's another industry that provides not only stone for the maintenance of way crews, but also for export, and it gives us another industry to switch. Okay, there is some trees missing here, so we are working on some of the scenery. This was a recently added little bit that I had to do because I changed the fascia. You'll notice it's not the same color as everything else, but another area where I can model some snow fading out into ice. And you can see where someone gave up trying to keep the snow off the road and just said, well, we're going to pile what we can and the rest is going to stay. And as we travel through winter, some deer, frozen river, and we'll keep on going along the main line here. This is part of the quiet portion of the layout where there's not a whole lot happening. No industries to switch, just a nice place for the trains to sort of stretch out and watch them run. And then we have to transition back out of winter into autumn. So that starts happening right here where the town where the old company houses are. And then we round the corner, which is kind of where we started a little bit. There's a station, heavily abused station, very worn, being repaired, re-roofed, or repainted. And then another quiet portion as we disappear under the steps. So popping out back from behind the stairs, we pass a small service station, fire station, and the main line Ys again. We'll go along that Y here in just a second, but we come to our last industry to talk about on the lower level, and that is the Heartland Intermodal Yard, which is all ground-based, no port, and it receives all of its containers by either truck or train. So eventually all those lights will be connected. They're recent additions, and you can see they are just a bit loose. And in the back we have a road building scene where crews are hard at work expanding the highway. Okay, so let's talk about what happens behind the layout. Coming off the Y, we have a swing gate that goes into it's almost like a shadow box type area. This is going to be a rain scene, and it is buried right above the workbench. There's the workbench. You can see it's kind of a mess down there. But working on that will be a how-to video. So once that gets working, I'll be able to show that to everyone. And here's the throttle. So those two locomotives that are sitting here, those are our helpers that bring trains upgrade, because as we are going here, we are quickly increasing at a rather steep grade. The layout does make a loop, becomes single track, and then it comes to the upper deck. And you'll notice the upper deck right now, this is hidden staging. It is an absolute disaster. So I did take a few locomotives off my layout, not because I don't like them. In fact, I like them very much. But I have so many locomotives, they don't all fit. So they're sitting back here. They are locomotives that need weathering. They're locomotives that are not from the home road. So if I took them off, it would be okay. And you'll notice that my staging yard is full of maintenance of way. So I've got a welded rail train sitting back there. It's actually occupying 2 tracks. And here's the welded rail train. There is some ballast. I happen to like maintenance of way equipment very much. So when Microtrains released the welded rail cars, I went searching for the lift cars that put the rail down, found them from somebody offering them 3D printed, and then put the trucks, couplers, painted them, and there we are. There's a whole video series on that. And so whether you leave through this area back here near the light bulb, or whether you leave through that area over there, you come up to the upper deck of the layout, and let me show you what that looks like. If you pop through that hole in the wall on the far end of the staging, you can come to our first metro station, which is obviously under construction. And then from there, you'll come down to our one and only coal mine on the layout. And if you go the other way, you'll see where our first locomotive, when we talked about the Allegany Northern, is stored, with a small little tank car that is used to fuel up diesel fuel. And then of course that is a place for us to park our locomotive when it's done. Let's talk about the coal mine first. So this mine represents or this part of the layout rather represents the tipple portion of the mine. So we start off with an office, a yard for loading, and you do see some heavy equipment, and the idea that this mine goes to somewhere beyond, to a backdrop that, well, isn't quite there. Some of the equipment's weathered, some of it's unweathered. It's an ongoing process, but this part of the layout terminates in a small marshalling yard, basically just to hold coal cars. And yes, there are coal cars from various eras. And then the track gives the impression that the main line continues, even though once it gets into that tunnel, there is nowhere else for the train to go, and it pretty much just acts as another place to shove coal cars. All right, so we're going to come back along here. Let's go back into the town. Lots of things to switch here. We have our lumberyard. We have a small town area that's getting ready to pop up. And then we have some unnamed industries, but it's a place where I can spot up to 4 or 5 different cars, depending on length and what I feel like storing there. I've got this place that's obviously going to take the refrigerated cars. There's 2 of them in location. There's 2 of them on the lower layout that will eventually trade out. And then there's 2 industries in the back. Well, they just don't have any name or purpose right now. There is a small commuter station that trains can stop at. And there is a void space that will be an industry, but right now it's just an empty lot. And then that continues back around the layout, and there's the second hole where it jumps back into the grade that can either go down to the lower deck or into staging, and it Y's off. Let's go to the other side of the Y. And on this side of the Y, we have a lot of stuff. And all that stuff is eventually going to become a giant intermodal yard. In fact, it takes up this entire section of the layout. This will be a port. If you didn't know that by seeing the boat. Yes, we need a boat or 2 more, but it gives me a place to display these very excellent scale trains, auto racks, some more container cranes, another place for some locomotives, which are hiding back there, and of course some place to put the deluxe road railers. And that is the end of the layout. So that's obviously the scene that is the furthest behind, but eventually we'll get there and start detailing it. Okay, that is going to do us for the 2024 layout intro. For the new subscribers, that gives you an idea of what the railroad's all about. For those of you who have been following the channel, I do appreciate you. Hope you stay with us. And it gives you guys a 0 mark for where the layout started, so that when we do the wrap at the end of the year, you'll know everything that's changed since the beginning. And a couple other little tidbits that didn't quite get mentioned, but are worth noting. The standard on the layout for rolling stock, couplers, and wheel sets, it's all micro trains. So I do use the micro trains, body mount, truck mount, whatever it is. I do use the plastic wheels because I've had nothing but trouble with the metal wheels. So we do go with the plastic, and we seem to get a lot less issues, especially in the event that something derails, I don't get a short. And there's no standard on the locomotive. I have everything from Bachmann, Atlas, scale trains. These are Broadway limited. For those of you who have been following my rants, you know the 2 SD40-2s are the bane of my existence right now, but that southern unit is a favorite. And you will notice that there are some older Atherns, Fox Valleys, and stuff like that. But I'll tell you what, some of the Atlas stuff that's coming out now, really, really nice. So Atlas, it's probably Atlas, Cato, and scale trains have the majority of my fleet. All right, so we're going to go ahead and end it there. And looking forward to a good year of modeling, and hope you all follow along.